Today I want to talk to you about the similarities between Emily Ratajkowski and this subterranean termite. Now, before I get into that, I do need to give a little bit of background. So back in 1959, a Russian scientist named Dmitry Belyaev started a fox breeding experiment that ended up being pretty famous. Now, he decided to breed these foxes for one specific trait, and that trait was friendliness. And the way he would do it is he would measure each wild, he had a lot of wild foxes, he would measure each fox by how close these foxes would tolerate him standing next to them. So if there was one fox that he could get right up next to and stand next to it without it trying to run away, then he would select for that fox. And the other foxes he would not breed with. Now, sure enough, after a few short generations, he started to see his fox population becoming more and more friendly. And this was not unexpected. Now, what was unexpected are a few of these other traits that he started to notice in these foxes. So his foxes started to have these things like floppy ears, not hanging down ears, but the ears were floppier. And he started to notice that they would bark and they started wagging their tails. And they had these faces that were shorter and wider proportionally than the wild foxes that he started with. Now, he would also find that they had these proportionally larger eyes, and they would start to lick his hand, not just allowing him to stand close to them, but they would start to actually lick his hand. And finally, there was some pretty serious changes in coat color. Now, these traits didn't appear out of nowhere. These are actually characteristics of juvenile foxes. But for some reason, when he selected for friendliness, these juvenile traits were being carried over into adulthood. Now, there's a word for this phenomenon, and that word is neoteny. And it turns out that it happens all the time in nature. So neoteny can be formally defined as the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. So some other examples of neoteny that we see in nature is an axolotl. And an axolotl is like a salamander, but they maintain these gills as they grow up, whereas normal salamanders lose the gills as they become an adult. Now, there are even some human traits that are considered neotenic when compared to our more closely related apes. First is lactose tolerance. Now, most mammals can tolerate lactose. They drink milk as juveniles. But once they become an adult, they can no longer digest the lactose. Humans, however, for the most part, have held on to this lactose tolerance. Other human traits that are neotenic compared to apes are a flatter face and a larger brain-to-body ratio. Now, I already know what you're thinking. You're thinking, he's going to make this about termites, isn't he? So neoteny actually happens in most, or if not all, of the termites. And that basically what happens is a worker will develop and will become sexually mature, either a queen or a king, without having to go through the whole process of growing wings and flying away or any other reason. And a termite colony will do this when they need a queen in a hurry. Let's say their queen dies, or their queen just can't lay fast enough, and they need supplementary reproductives to lay enough eggs to keep the colony going. Finally, let's get back to Emily here. There's actually a fairly well-regarded theory that states that straight men are attracted to females who exhibit neotenic proportions. And these neotenic proportions are larger eyes, a smaller nose, and larger lips. Now, these are traits that are present in babies and in children, but are carried over into adulthood by women, and men actually find it attractive. What we don't know. So neoteny and human attractiveness is still definitely in the hypothesis or theory stage, and there needs to be some more work done on this before we can state that it's actually true. So there's this fascinating scenario that happens. It's been documented at least once in the termites, and that is that a queen termite will occasionally lay an egg that is an exact clone of herself. And this egg will grow up and develop into a neotenic queen. So it won't fly away and start a new colony somewhere else. It's going to stay home and it's going to lay eggs that are exactly the same eggs that the queen will lay. And a queen would do this because it's a way of selfishly promoting her genes into the next generation. So instead of having to share the genes with her king, she's just putting 100% of her own genes out there. So we could definitely use a lot more research in that area.